Hello, my name is Paul de Herrera. I'm a pre-sales security engineer at Tufin. Tufin is the industry leader in security policy automation and orchestration solutions with over 15 years experience in on-premises environments. Over the last few years, Tufin has been focused on extending that knowledge into the cloud with a ground-up rewrite of our key features for the cloud and Kubernetes clusters. SecureCloud is a SaaS offering written in the cloud for the cloud, and it completes Tufin's security policy automation and orchestration solution suite for cloud-native, hybrid cloud, and Kubernetes environments. Tufin's SecureCloud revolutionizes cloud security. Companies no longer need to compromise agility for security or security for agility. You can leverage SecureCloud's policy-centric, automation-based approach to secure your journey into the cloud. With SecureCloud, you'll gain confidence knowing your cloud-native, hybrid cloud, and Kubernetes applications are properly configured and secure. Now, I've heard many Tufin customers describe their journey into the cloud as a wild, wild west type experience. This is because the security group has no visibility into the cloud assets deployed, and more specifically, our customers have little or no visibility into the access controls in place between their cloud assets, or more importantly, which assets are internet accessible and how effective their current security policy is protecting those assets. Now, as we move through the demonstration, we'll focus on 4 key elements. The first one is visibility. SecureCloud brings visibility across public cloud assets and Kubernetes clusters. SecureCloud also brings insights into application topology, industry standard benchmarks, and best practices for the cloud platform. As we move forward, you'll see how SecureCloud deploys security policy guardrails. SecureCloud gives the user the ability to discover, define, and even auto-generate security guardrails using native network policy controls. SecureCloud gives the user the ability to segment and microsegment access to establish a zero-trust architecture. Now, another key element Tufin brings to market is a continuous compliance model. This is important for DevOps automation integration. That is, SecureCloud integrates into your CI/CD pipeline. SecureCloud also brings security and cloud operations alerts, a dashboard, and reporting facilities. All of these features help you realize continuous compliance as you develop and deploy your cloud applications. As you'll discover during the demonstration, we do all of this without compromise. SecureCloud gives you increased cloud application development productivity, increased automation deployment, and increased cloud computing business benefit. When you first log in to SecureCloud, you'll be presented with a dashboard, which gives you an instant current view of both public cloud here and Kubernetes environments here. The color and percentage shown on each tile is an indicator of the security health. You're able to drill down into each of the tiles to quickly access areas of concern. First, let's look at the public cloud. In the risky ports tile, this indicates the severity of risk posed to your public cloud environment due to high-risk ports and displays the percentage of your applications exposed to this risk. For example, open risky ports like Telnet can lead to WannaCry types of security events. As you can see, if I drill down into the risky ports, I can see that one of the assets belonging to Prod CRM is exposed to the internet via Telnet. I could then drill down further to see which asset. If I were to click on it again, I'd be able to get a lot more details on the asset itself, but we'll go into these details later. The permissive access tile indicates when SGs, NSGs, and ASGs are far too open. Best practice would be to avoid the use of unlimited ranges and use only well-defined ports and IP addresses. The policy violations tile indicates the severity of risk posed to your public cloud environment due to your cloud vendor security definitions being out of line with your own security policy, and then displays the percentage of your applications exposed to this risk. Now, tag usage tile shows the number of assets within your environment that have not been tagged. Tags are an important identifier that can lead to more granular policy details and compliance checks. We also have a tile for CIS benchmarks for the public cloud. The CIS benchmark is a subset of security controls developed by the Center for Internet Security, CIS, and adapted for Azure and AWS. These controls have gained widespread acceptance as a baseline for public cloud security and can be downloaded from the CIS website. This is the CIS website, and you can see the address for their particular page regarding CIS benchmarks here. SecureCloud runs an automatic audit process on your monitored cloud accounts, which tests each control and displays its status together with guidance for remediation. So as we drill down into this, we can see each one of the tests and which ones have failed. As we move on to the Kubernetes section of our dashboard, we'll see that the first tile is Kubernetes vulnerabilities. This tile shows the known vulnerabilities in the Kubernetes implementations. SecureCloud monitors for these vulnerabilities and updates accordingly. It is best practice to regularly review the Kubernetes vulnerabilities in your environment and make sure you have the latest patches in place. Our CTO, Reuven Harrison, recently wrote an interesting article on a newly exposed Kubernetes vulnerability include the net raw capability. This is the article as it's seen on our website, and you can read it at your leisure here at this address. The next tile, privileged workloads, shows if there are any containers running with its privileged security context set to true. A privileged workload can refer either to a pod or a container, and with these privileges set, it may be possible for the pod or container to bypass all Kubernetes network policies. This could lead to a pod having access to the host itself. As you can see, we can drill down into this and receive more detailed information. And we can see, in this particular case, everything is working well. No worries. Now, the next tile that we'll talk about is container vulnerabilities. The container vulnerabilities tile shows all containers that have CVEs, what they are and how they should be remediated. Container scans are a good part of security posture, but they're still only one part of it. As you can see, again, we can drill down into this and see the very specific vulnerabilities and even find out which CVEs apply. And then we can link off to that specific CVE to get more information about the vulnerability. Oops. The next tile we'll talk about is permissive network policies. In this tile, we showed if the policy appears to be overly permissive. Similar to firewall rules being too open. Best practice here would be to avoid the use of any in your Kubernetes network policy specifications and in your Secure Cloud Kubernetes policy. Again, we can drill down into this to see more. The last tile on the dashboard is the CIS benchmark for Kubernetes. Again, this is our CIS benchmark. As it was for the public cloud, this is for the Kubernetes. It's a subset of security controls developed by the CIS and adapted for Kubernetes. And you can see we can drill down into this. Next, we'll take a look at the application graph. This shows all of the possible connections, and it may be that not all of them are being used. This could be due to any type rules. SecureCloud will be able to warn you of this overly permissive state if it exists. Now, if I select one of the items in red, you can see that it indicates there is some risky access. There are labels defined by tags. We use tags to identify what all these services are. We also have a tagging module to consolidate all of the tags, especially useful if developers are using different tags for the same items. For example, app name, cost center. These can be consolidated into application, for example. Now, if your environment has hundreds of assets, the application graph view will become unwieldy. This is where the asset list becomes useful. And you can find the asset list here under Cloud Resources. Now, we can filter this down to find very specific assets that we're looking for. In this case, maybe I'm interested in seeing anything with risky access to security policy violations and maybe only those items in AWS. So you can see I can very easily filter this down. Now, another way to drill down into this is to double click on an item in the assets in the application graph, and we are presented with the assets graph. Now, if we click on one of the items here, like the app service, we discover that this is actually a load balancer. And in this case, we have two servers that are both have risky services associated with them. And if we drill down into this, we can see that there's risky access associated with this server on Telnet. Now, under security control, we can see the NSG information from the AWS. This is not using any agents, but it uses AWS's own APIs to gather NSG, ASG, network, RBAC, and IAM policy information. This is all gathered with read-only access. There's also some other information about environment properties and tags, as we saw before. Now, as we switch here to the Security Access tab, we see the inbound and outbound rules and the status for each one of those rules. We can see we have risky access here. Now, if I click on the three dots next to this rule, we can see that I can compare this to the policy, I can choose to add it to the security policy, or I can actually delete access to the cloud for this. So we see that the violation here or the service is Telnet, and it's probably not the best practice here to remove access because the IAM policy is updated every 24 hours, and the access would just simply come back. However, this is something like an S3 bucket containing corporate secrets. You may want to remove this immediately, although ideally you'd want to prevent this access in the first place, and we'll talk about that going forward. Now, the next thing I want to show you is the cloud policy, which is found here. As you can see, it's very easy to add rules to your cloud policy manually. And so we can change things like the scope, either global or application, and the source can be, tags or subnets, same with the destination, and the service can be network service or some cloud action, right? Now, what we can do here is we can expose the API so that the developer can check against the repos or check their builds in Jenkins or Bamboo, whatever tools they have for that. That way, they can easily check before they deploy and see if they get a violation. If they do, they can fix that proactively. So now we're part of the DevOps process. But by becoming part of or integrating with the existing tools and trying not to introduce new ones. So this allows the streamlining of service, not having to go back and forth to delete things or go back to the app developer and say that they need to start over again. Will help prevent those errors in the first place by giving them this functionality. So next I want to show you configuration settings, which are listed here. And I want to show you specifically notifications. So under configuration, you'll see that we have the ability to issue email notifications or Slack notifications and configure how we do that, right? So we turn this on and now we have email notifications being sent out, and we can edit that, right, with an email address that we want to send to. Maybe this is going to be an operations group at company.com, whatever it is. And then with Slack, we can put in the URL for our Slack environment, and then we issue Slack notifications. Next, I'd like to show you the Kubernetes environment that I have connected to SecureCloud. So we do that here under the section called Kubernetes. Now, if we look at the service graph, I'm looking at this cluster and the connectivity in my application here. Now, I can exercise this application by simply going to the page, for example, the admin page for this application, and I can just kind of click around, create some traffic. Maybe I want to look at the customer page for this application, and just log in, exercise the application as I have it. Now, if we go back to the service graph, what we'll notice is where SecureCloud is recognizing new connections. Now I'm up to 9 different connections here. And so it's important to note that we are in a learning mode, which you can see here. And we'll talk about enforce mode a little bit later, but just understand at this point we are learning application connections, and you can see it's still going up. Now, we can filter this out by time interval, or if this starts becoming unwieldy because there are so many connections here that the graph becomes unusable, we can also filter this by label. So narrow down into just the very specific parts of the application that are relevant to whatever I'm doing at the time. Just looking at the application here. Now, also, a thing to note here is we are discovering vulnerabilities as well. As we discover the connections, we're understanding whether or not there's a vulnerability associated with each connection, and we're giving it a score. You can see that in the little circles here in different grades. So if we look at one of these, we can jump over to the vulnerabilities section of SecureCloud and understand any and all vulnerabilities discovered with this part of our application. We call out the actual CVE and even link to the CVE externally on Canonical's website so that you can read more about that particular CVE. Now, the important thing here is we can choose to do something about this within SecureCloud, or we can just choose to ignore it. It's really up to you. And we also have the ability, because we're an API-driven offering, we have the ability to link into other vulnerability scanners. In this particular case, we are using Claire, which is an open source vulnerability scanner. Now, another great view here, if I wanted to look at this part of my application, I can look under here and see different workloads, security, and different things that are being called out, and understand, by hovering over, I can understand more detail about this particular security issue and what I might be able to do to remediate the issue. Of course, I can see other things here about labels that are being used and the particular container that is this part of the application. Now, I want to show you one other way you can get this information by going under settings, cluster resources, pods. This lists all of the pods in the cluster, shows you all the containers, all the labels, and again shows you container risk, allows you to hover over each of these to understand the risk in more detail and also remediation steps. Now, SecureCloud has been in a learning mode and has discovered all of these new connections as I've been exercising the application on the admin page and the user page and such. And so now, what is it that we do with these connections, right? So we have this list of connections. I can select them individually, or I can select all of them and add them to the policy. Now, once I've done this, and I've received confirmation that everything was applied to the policy successfully, I can now look at the cluster policy. And here we see all of these rules in terms of what's allowed from source to destination within a namespace, and ports and protocols. Now, if I need to, I can add rules here manually by choosing the namespace and the destination description, just adding that. Now, there's lots of good information here, things like when was this connection hit, it has a timestamp and such, and so this is a great way to understand how your application is being used and whether there may be some areas of your application that in fact are not even being used at all. And so you could very easily tighten up the policy here. Perhaps there's an area that has been hit, it's in your policy, but it's no longer needed. You can just very simply choose to delete that particular rule. Now, the next step here is to enforce this policy, and we can do that by going under the settings, general, and we'll just switch this over to the enforce mode, and that'll take just a second. Great, now we've got the confirmation, we've changed to enforce mode, and now we're enforcing the rules of this particular policy. Now, when we go back to the cluster policy, I will remove this rule, and then we'll see how that affects our application. So I'm going to choose to remove this connection. Now, once I've modified this policy, I'll switch the policy into enforce mode. And we'll just do that here, enforce policy. Now, after just a second, we get a confirmation that the mode was changed. And now if I exercise the application, I can see that the time part of my application is no longer working properly. Now, if we go back to SecureCloud and we look at the service graph, we'll notice that there's a connection problem here, indicated by the dotted red line. The connection from admin to time is no longer working. It will also notice that there's a new connection discovered here. Now we can apply these to the policy and wait for our confirmation here. There, policy was successfully applied. Now if we look at the policy, we should see the time, admin to time is now there in the policy. And if we go back to our application and refresh the page, we'll notice that now we get the time information again. Now, if we go back to SecureCloud and we look at the service graph, we'll notice that the connection was restored to its original state. Now, this is great, but problems can arise when you have more than just a few containers? What happens if you have 90 or even 900 containers? This will become very unwieldy, and so you'll want to automate this. But how do you do that? Well, if you go to the cluster policy, there's a configuration file that needs to be written. This file knows all the information about your cluster, the number of master nodes, the number of worker nodes, how many pods, essentially all the stuff that goes into the configuration file. And it also includes rules and network rules regarding how the cluster behaves and who they talk to. This is a YAML file. It's a network security YAML file. Now, typically someone has to write this. Security guys will say it's code, so it's the dev's responsibility. And the devs will say it's security, so security team needs to write it. Now, ideally, they'll write it together, but we can do this for you. SecureCloud will generate this file for you. So if we go here and we choose export as network policies, you'll see that I can have the ability to download this file. I'm going to download it to my downloads folder, and we'll just open this up and take a look at it. Now this YAML file, which has all sorts of network policy, security policy objects in it, and all of the policy that we just created, this can become hundreds of lines of code that someone is responsible for writing. Well, now with SecureCloud, we write this for you. You can use this YAML file to check against your policy to see where you have violations. This now joins the teams and prevents the dev teams from writing violations into their environment to begin with. We are introducing guardrails. Now, if you're an existing Secure Track or Secure Change customer, we can integrate SecureCloud into Track and Change. We can do that by clicking on the Apply on Firewalls menu item here. Now, this integration will launch workflows in Secure Change to make modifications to on-prem firewalls directly from SecureCloud. As you can see in this graphic, there's lots of information about the status of these tickets. Some are pending, some have completed, and for the ones that have completed, there's actually a link to the ticket ID in Secure Change. By clicking this link, you'll be directed into Secure Change where you'll be able to see the actual status of that ticket. Or all of the steps that were taken, which user approved the steps, and all those types of things, whatever you have defined in your workflow. Finally, I'd like to show you the system management capabilities within SecureCloud, found here under Configuration. From here, you can manage your subscription key, you can invite new users to view your accounts, and also integrate with Azure Active Directory. There's also a link here to contact SecureCloud support. You can get support here. Now, if you click on users, you can very easily invite a new user by simply typing in their email address. This will send an invitation to the user with instructions on how they can join your SecureCloud instance and see everything that you've configured and built. With Active Directory, we can fill out this form and connect to the Active Directory in Azure to provide a single sign-on experience using those credentials. There are also some risk configuration parameters here which can be set. And so we've covered gaining visibility of the environment, such as staging, pre-prod, and production. We've set guardrails in place to manage the development process without slowing anything down, and in doing so have ensured compliance by removing violations. We've been able to gain visibility and control of your security posture across a hybrid cloud environment to ensure continuous compliance and achieve zero trust without compromise. Thank you for your time.